everyone. Paul's choice of topic for today was it doesn't always get better, the value of pessimism, and hopefully when he is able to join us we'll hear a bit from him about why he selected that topic. For those of us who are here in person, I am going to stay sitting here because it's not, I think, worth me moving the computer, because I hope Paul will get here. So you'll either have to have me as a voice behind you or turn around and face me. Everybody online, I've turned the camera around so hopefully you can see me a bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'd like to share a few things from a service a friend of mine shared with me called Old Beginnings and New Beginnings, which does talk about changes, things we regret and things we move forwards on. So whilst that's not exactly pessimism, I think it's somewhat linked. So here is a prayer that I'd like to read out. Take time to work, it is the price of success. Take time to think, it is the source of power. Take time to read, it is the fountain of wisdom. Take time to worship, it is the highway to reverence. Take time to be friendly, it is the road to happiness. Take time to laugh, it helps to lift life's load. Take time for the word, it comforts you and gives you faith, hope and love, and it washes the dust of earth from your eyes. Take time for the Spirit, it is life's only true lasting investment. And my friend Adrian, who shared this with me, suggested that part of what spiritual reflection should involve would be, he says, as we gather together, we reflect upon those things which we ought to have done and have not done. Hello. And those things which we did do and should not have done, and consider what these were and how to make amends. We also think about those things that we ought to have done and did do, and those things we did do and realise were good, and so reflect in a manner to give thanks to ourselves and others. We should think positively of ourselves, of those closest to us, of our friends, of those about whom we have little opinion, positively too about even our declared enemies, and indeed give good blessing to the widest number. But for all the thought in the world, what then matters is what we do. How can we add to the depth of good in the lives of ourselves and others? How can we make new positive beginnings for another person close and for many far away? So we are sorry and thankful, and we make amends. In saying yes to our own lives, we should help others say yes to theirs. So that's a reading from the service Old Beginnings and New Beginnings. I suppose I chose that because, as you'll have seen, I picked the famous image of a glass half full or possibly half empty to illustrate the orders of service. There's also a mistake in the date there, so I guess you can consider that either a glass half empty and that it's the wrong date, or a glass half full because it all reminds us of last week, which was nice and sunny.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I've called this service, it doesn't always get better, the value of pessimism. And I had a really good experience of pessimism today, because basically we arrived about 20 past 10 at Heworth and have gone at less than 1 mile an hour ever since. Yeah, I have no idea. And then when we got to the flyover, you know, just didn't move. So I was pessimistic, thinking I'll never get there, we'll never get there, we'll never get there. So there we are. There's pessimism for you. So I'm sorry I'm late, and I just want to make it clear that when I say there's value in pessimism, that is not the same as negativity. But pessimism has a long and venerable history. I had 2 readings, I'll only read one of them today, and it's from the Book of Ecclesiastes, the beginning. How about this for pessimism? The words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What do people gain from all the toil at which they toil under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hurries to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes round to the north. Round and round goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, they continue to flow. All things are wearisome. more than one can express. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing which it is said, see, this is new? It's already been in the ages before us. The people of long ago are not remembered, nor will there be any remembrance of people yet to come by those who come after them. I, the teacher, when king over Israel, applied my mind to seek and search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business God has given the human beings to be busy with. I saw all the deeds that are done under the sun, and see all is vanity and a chasing after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lying. You may wonder why I have chosen the subject, it doesn't always get better, the value of pessimism. But when I tell you what inspired me to do it, I think you will know exactly what I'm talking about. On Thursday, the World Cup begins. And I was inspired by the World Cup of 2018. And you may remember, I was in Loughborough on a course actually, and I ended up watching with my boss. She was watching it with our children, one of whom was 8 at the time. And England lost to Croatia. And my little boy of 8 was crying inconsolably. And Christine said to him, you have to understand from our years of experience, do not expect England to win. They never do. And if you think for a moment that they might, you are going to have a lot of tearful days ahead. That is the value of pessimism. And if you want to know the horrors of optimism, I suppose the key World Cup in my life was when you're in your teens, isn't it? I was 15, 1978. There are some words that you may remember. These are optimistic and ridiculous. So, see if you remember these words. We're on the march with Ali's army. We're going through the Argentine. And we'll really shake them up when we win the World Cup, because Scotland are the greatest football team. Now, I don't think that worked out particularly well. They lost 2-1 to Peru and then drew 1-1 with Iran. And then, amazingly, went on to beat the Dutch, who got into the final. But anyway, they were never the greatest football team. It doesn't matter how often you say it or believe it or think it, Pollyanna-like, close your eyes and wish. Scotland were never going to win the World Cup. And I don't think there are any Scots in the room. If there are any Scots on the computer, I just say to you now, Scotland is not going to win the World Cup this year, and nor, I doubt, are England. 30 years ago, we sang It's Coming Home, but it was obviously stuck in a queue. What is optimism? Well, optimism is the belief that everything will turn out well. Pessimism is the opposite. So let's have a think about optimism and pessimism. There's a lovely quote I read. The world needs both optimists and pessimists. The optimist invented the aeroplane, the pessimist invented the parachute. But think about optimism and pessimism. I'm going to take us a little bit more serious now. Imagine you were Jewish in Germany in the 1930s. I'm sure there were optimistic Jews, and I'm sure there were pessimistic Jews. The optimistic Jews would have said, I suspect, something like, well, this Hitler is a bit of a madman, but it'll all pass, everything's going to be all right, the Germans are good people. The pessimist said, this country's going to hell and getting out. It was the pessimist who survived. I suspect similar things have happened recently, Gaza, in Lebanon, in the Ukraine, when things seem to be going to hell, sometimes optimism is going to not do you any good at all. Pessimism, in those cases, will have saved lives. Now, that's not the same as being fatalistic. You remember Dad's Army? Fraser. We're all doomed. We're doomed. That constant attitude, didn't matter what was going to happen, we're doomed. But pessimism is really optimism, pessimism. I think we tend to think of pessimism as kind of all negative. But I suspect if we think about it really, it's just about probability. What do we think is likely to happen? Are the odds stacked in this way or that way? And if the odds are stacked against us and we think, you know what, it's not going to work out well, we're pessimistic. If we think, you know, it might just be okay, then we're optimistic. But the thing which stops pessimism leading into total despair is something else. And that's something else, not optimism, it's hope. So I can be pessimistic about England's chances in the World Cup. And my Scottish friends can be pessimistic about Scotland's chances in the World Cup. I don't have any Brazilian friends, but I'm sure that I can't. They may be pessimistic about their chances, which I suspect are not as good as they used to be. But everybody still hopes. Everybody still hopes. I can believe that England aren't going to win, really, to protect myself from the almost inevitable shattering of my hopes. But hope stays alive. It flickers, drives us mad sometimes. Without hope, pessimism is a turgid and terrible experience. With hope, it becomes a reasonable weighing up of reality. And also, pessimism and hope together can lead to action. I was listening on my way here, in my frustration, as we weren't moving, to a ceramic artist called Peter Slater, who I'd never heard of, who was on Desert Island Discs today. And he talked, as many do, about the environmental crisis. What he said, why have we not learnt? Pessimism about the environment leads people to think things are going badly, but hope means, but we need to do something about it. But I suspect we wouldn't see the need to do something about it if we were not pessimistic. Because if you're optimistic, you just think it'll be all right. It'll come good in the end. A pessimist said, no, we're on a trajectory downwards and we need to act. I'm actually I was extremely disturbed about the reaction to the death of Henry Novak this week. What happened was hideous. And clearly, a policeman did not respond to a young man who said, I've been stabbed. A policeman seemed more bothered about a phone call that said a crime has been committed. And when he saw the person who had been accused of committing that crime, he didn't take that person seriously. That is a terrible dereliction of duty, and that needs to be looked at. But I don't think that had a lot to do with race, and I don't think that had a lot to do with the police learning how to treat that. But that has been hijacked. And this seems to be happening all over the world, a rise in quite unpleasant racist responses to things. And I'm quite pessimistic with the rise of Alternative for Deutschland, with the way Trump's ICE is going, with the way that Nigel Farage is now being outflanked by an even more disturbing party called Restore Britain, with the rise of the National Front in France, or It's called something else now, isn't it? With the sons of Italy in Italy, this rise in this idea that this nation is the best nation is disturbing, and I'm pessimistic. But I still have a hope inside me that that can be turned around. I wish I could say I'm acting on that hope. Maybe I need to. But if it wasn't for the fear coming from pessimism that things could get worse, then people would not act to make sure they get better. And where does optimism get you? I want to take you back 6 years, can you believe it? That's slightly more. And a virus had happened in China, and China was being shut down. And suddenly it was in Italy. And the Italians were saying, don't see each other, don't get together, stay out, this is going to come your way. And I remember Boris Johnson, and I don't particularly like the man, but I think his attitude was quite similar to people I spoke to. He won't come here. Oh, people are so, this is ridiculous. What are you talking about? Let's have the Cheltenham Festival. Let's get on. And probably thousands of people died who shouldn't have died because of optimism. Because optimism is this idea that it will work out in the end. Pessimism leads to a realism, which makes us act. But hope is the thing. Pessimism does not say it will definitely happen. It says, unless I do something, it will happen. So I suppose my final thoughts on this are be sensible, sometimes be pessimistic, but never lose hope. So let us pray. Let us think of the despair we see all around us. Pessimism ultimately comes from a certainty that we will die, a certainty that between now and then, life will not just be a series of triumphs. Let us pray for those whose pessimism has turned to despair. For the people of Africa who will be unable to get the fertilizers they need, and for those who are beginning to think they won't feed their families. For those who are pessimistic, give them the hope to do whatever it takes to resolve the situation for their families. Situation in Israel, Iran, the Strait of Hormuz, Lebanon, all look pretty desperate. Despite Donald Trump's constant optimistic claims that peace is just around the corner, it doesn't look like. Pray for those whose hope will make them work hard to resolve this issue. President Putin looks unlikely to want to stop the war in the Ukraine. Pray for those whose hope leads them to take risks to bring about peace. And let us remember that of the 64 countries in the World Cup, 63 of them will be disappointed. But that is the way of life. And let us say together a prayer of hope, the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. This was written by Alain de Botton when he wrote. There was a program on the radio used to be called Point of View, and this was about pessimism and its value. And I just thought this was rather good. He is an atheist, but there's actually some value, some positivity here in religion. I'm just going to do the end of it. Yet, while it is undeniable that the scientific and economic trajectories of mankind have been pointed firmly in an upward direction for several centuries, you and I do not comprise mankind. None of us as individuals can dwell exclusively amidst the groundbreaking developments in genetics or telecommunications that lend our age its distinctive and buoyant prejudices. We may derive some benefit from the availability of hot baths and computer chips, but our lives are no less subject to accident, frustrated ambition, heartbreak, jealousy, anxiety, or death than with those of our medieval forebears. But at least our ancestors had the advantage of living in a religious era which never made the mistake of promising its population that happiness could ever make a permanent home for itself on this earth. The secular are at this moment in history a great deal more optimistic than the religious. Something of an irony, given the frequency with which the religious have been derided by the non-religious for their apparent naivety and credulousness. It is the secular whose longing for perfection has grown so intense as to lead them to imagine that paradise might be realised on this earth after just a few more years of financial growth and medical research. With no evident awareness of the contradiction, they may, in the same breath, gruffly dismiss a belief in angels, while sincerely trusting that the combined powers of the IMF, the medical research establishment, Silicon Valley, and democratic politics will together cure the ills of mankind. The benefits of a philosophy of pessimism are to be seen in relation to love. Christianity and Judaism present marriage not as a union inspired and governed by subjective enthusiasm, but rather, and more modestly, as a mechanism by which individuals can assume an adult position in society and thence, with the help of a close friend, undertake to nurture and educate the next generation under divine guidance. These limited expectations tend to forestall the suspicion, so familiar to secular partners, that there might have been more intense, angelic, or less fraught alternatives available elsewhere. Within the religious ideal, friction, disputes, and boredom are signs not of error, but of life proceeding according to plan. These religions do recognise our desire to adore passionately. They know of our need to believe in others, to worship and serve them, and to find in them a perfection which eludes us in ourselves. They simply insist that these objects of adoration should always be divine, rather than human. Therefore, they assign us eternally youthful, attractive, and virtuous deities to shepherd us through life, while reminding us on a daily basis that human beings are comparatively humdrum and flawed, creations worthy of forgiveness and patience, a detail which is apt to elude our notice in the heat of marital squabbling. Why can't you be more perfect? This is the incensed question that lurks beneath the majority of secular arguments. In their effort to keep us from hurling our curdled dreams at one another, religions have the good sense to provide us with angels to worship and lovers to tolerate. A pessimistic worldview does not have to entail a life stripped of joy. Pessimists can have a far greater capacity for appreciation than their opposite numbers, but they will never expect things to turn out well. and so may be amazed by the modest successes which occasionally break out across the darkening horizons. And I say all that, that because we need to accept the world as it is, not as we dream it might be, utopia. And I just want to finish, or I hand over to Louise for notices, with the words of Oscar Wilde from Lady Windermere's Fan. We're all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars.